Hello everybody, my name is Mindy Gower and this is my Module 16 for EDL 854 Educational Finance. Throughout this video and throughout this Google slide, I will be walking you through the case study Missing Booster Club Funds. Throughout this case study, it focuses on a scenario in which there are missing funds after ticket sales at a basketball game at George Washington Middle School. Mr. Stevens is the principal at this middle school and is very well liked and very well respected. And with that being said, there is very high parent involvement throughout the school. A couple of parent volunteers were in charge of the ticket sales that night, and a parent, Mrs. Bowman, handed Mr. Stevens the bank bag at the conclusion of the basketball game with $50 missing. She also made a statement to Mr. Stevens that there were 10 torn tickets that were not able to be used that night. So let's get started with this case study. Category 1. Problem identification and analysis. What do I know? Well, I know that Mrs. Bowman is an active member in the PTA and she is also a mother to a 7th grade cheerleader. I know that she recently asked Mr. Stevens for funding for her daughter to go to New York on a cheerleading trip. Her daughter was given the opportunity to go to New York for cheerleading because of her cheerleading capabilities. It mentioned throughout this case study that she was an all-star cheerleader, and that trip cost almost $800, and her mom went and asked Mr. Stevens for those funds so that she could go. Mr. Stevens denied the request because the money was only going to help support one student rather than a group of students. Mrs. Bowman was also a parent that was working the Monday night basketball game, and at the conclusion of the game, she handed Mr. Stevens a bank bag with $50 missing. She also stated to Mr. Stevens that 10 tickets were not able to be used because they were torn. Mr. Dumas, a community member at this town, made a clear remark to Mr. Stevens that night that he paid with a $50 bill just through a friendly conversation. And when Mr. Stevens looked in the bag that night, that $50 bill was missing. So that's kind of why this situation came up. I also know that at this basketball game, pre-numbered tickets were used. Category 1 continued. What do I need to know? I need to know the Booster Club policies. Knowing the Booster Club policies would help me see what parent volunteers know and what they don't know. I want to know what other volunteers were there and were helping Mrs. Bowman. I would like to know the admission ticket procedures. Where are the torn tickets? Was she told to throw them away? Does she have them? Where did those go? I would like to know what is in the bank bag. Is there an exchange of bills for the $50? What's exactly in there? That is something that we don't know that I need to know. And also, is there security footage available? If there was security footage available, I feel like that would help us crack this case study. Category 1 continued again. Identify the problem. The problem that we have here is that there is a discrepancy between the money that we have in the bag and the number of tickets that were sold. The cost of 10 tickets is $50, and $50 is missing. Category 2, proposed plan of action. I would obtain written and signed statements from Mr. Stevens and the security guard on duty at the time that they were counting the money. I would then contact the district accounting office, see the policies that are in place, and if there needs to be any improvements to those. I would obtain security footage if that is available. And then I would go ahead and contact Mrs. Brown. I would make sure that I do not accuse her of anything. I would just like to listen to her explanation. At the conclusion of that phone call, I would also contact the volunteers that were working with Mrs. Brown that night. I would continue the investigation by collecting data and making sure that all of my ducks are in a row before I make an accusation or come to the board with what I know and things like that. Next, I would work to improve safeguards for the future. I definitely do not want this to happen again, so we need to improve the safeguards that are in place. And I would also take the time to train the volunteers. Maybe some of the volunteers had no idea what to do if the tickets were actually torn. So those are some of the things that I would like to do for my proposed plan of action. Category 3, resolve the issues based on promoting the success of all students. First of all, my main goal is to focus on the mission of the school. I'm going to do this by protecting and building and establishing and maintaining the relationships. I'm not going to go ahead and accuse Mrs. Bowman for that. That's not something that I'm going to do right away. But it is my job to protect school funds, so that I'm going to go ahead with my proposed plan of action and figure out and get to the bottom of this. I'm going to train volunteers. I'm going to respect everyone involved. I do not want any rumors started or anything like that. So I'm going to respect people by making sure that I do not make accusations. And I'm going to help the PTA and ask them to share how their money is spent and maybe be in control of their own funds. Throughout School Money Matters, I've learned that the PTA should definitely do that. Category 3, continued. Resolution. Through following my plan of action, an investigation will occur to find out whether Mrs. Bowman was the one who mishandled the funds. And if she was, then we will go ahead and get to the bottom of that. And if she wasn't, we will continue the investigation. Under these circumstances, we have learned as a school district to strengthen our safeguards that are currently in place so that this doesn't happen again in the future. Category 4, debrief the problem. What was I thinking, feeling, and valuing as I was reading this case study? I was thinking that as a principal, this is my responsibility. I need to take ownership of this problem because overall, I am in charge of overseeing all financial responsibilities. I was also thinking, where are the missing funds and how am I going to go about finding them? I was also thinking, how can I make sure that this doesn't happen again? These were a couple of the questions that were going through my mind. What was I feeling? I was feeling that Mrs. Bowman didn't understand or follow the policies that were in place. I feel like she overstepped her boundaries a little bit. I also felt like there's a lack of staff support. I feel like we shouldn't have to have all parent volunteers. Sometimes staff participation is needed. I was feeling thankful for the parent volunteers because it is a hard job to do that. And I was also thankful for the community for packing the gym. I was valuing the relationships with students. I was valuing the relationship with parents. I wanted to make sure that those were established and maintained throughout this entire case study. And I was valuing the parent involvement in the school because that is kind of hard to come by these days. And I was also valuing Mr. Stevens and his integrity. Category 4, continued. The unresolved issues. Where is the $50? How will this be located and how will it be handled? How can we improve the safeguards in place? And how can we alter the admission ticket process? If those tickets were torn, are we supposed to put those in the bank bag as well? Are we supposed to go and ask the administrators what to do? There needs to be policies and procedures in place, and we need to make sure that our volunteers are trained to know what to do when that happens. And we need to be able to work with parents and make sure that they understand the policies and procedures in place. Category 5, reflect on Standard 8. How do you, as a school leader, promote effective and efficient management of the school or district? I do this by establishing an effective and efficient infrastructure, utilizing safeguards and improving these if need be. Transparent guidelines, policies, and procedures for all groups, booster clubs, PTA, athletics, etc. Being able to have transparent policies allows for everyone to see those policies and everyone knows exactly what is up. I also do this by being present at school events and supporting every student and every activity that they participate in. Category 5, reflect on Standard 8. How do you, as a school leader, promote the social learning of every student? I do this by protecting and managing student funds, supporting groups that fundraise for our students, building student and parent rapport, building and maintaining strong, effective, and positive relationships, and recognizing student achievements inside and outside of the classroom. How do you as a school leader promote academic learning? I do this by having a strong, effective, efficient financial infrastructure, using funds raised for all students if that is the intended purpose, and building and maintaining positive relationships with parents in the communities. And I do that by, if I were to get resources from the community, I would use that to help our classrooms. Throughout this case study, I learned a lot and I was able to break apart each of the information that was given to me in this case study, and I was very thankful that I had the opportunity to do this. I learned so much throughout this class and throughout the book School Money Matters, and definitely the information that I learned throughout this book helped me crack this case study. Thank you.